Now I can see that these are still wet below me, so I am going to let this dry for about 20 minutes. Um, it should be dry in 20 minutes. So keep that in mind. And what I notice is things get, the value changes a lot in that time too. So keep an eye on it. So put that away for at least 20 minutes. And if you have a hairdryer, you can speed it up. So while I'm waiting, I'm going to try to keep my mixtures moist by pushing them to one part of my palette, making them in little puddles.
To speed up time, I used a hairdryer. We're going to start with the mid-tone box.
And what I'm going to do is now practice my brushstroke drills on the first layer of gouache. And what you're going to notice is that, so we're going to start with, let's start with white. I'm going to mix up white on my palette. Just get into that. And what I want you to try to understand is you're actually going to put a wet brushstroke on a dry surface, but that dry surface is actually going to be reactivated by the brushstroke. So in order to keep these layers separate and not mix them by that rewetting, you're going to limit your brushstroke. And what we're going to do is we're going to do our same drills, which are those comma strokes, the S strokes, the U strokes, and any other strokes you want to experiment with on the mid-tone value. So I'm using white, and I'm going to do a comma stroke. Now you can see as I move the brush, the paint is lifting up the background a little bit. And this is par for the course, meaning you put something that re-wets, that's wet onto something that re-wets, you're gonna get a little bit of mixture. And that's fine. The problem is if you do too much of that, you're gonna lose the contrast of the stroke. So the idea is to practice that and get comfortable with it. So let's try our S stroke. It was less than perfect. Then let's try, I like the U stroke with the flat brush. So I'm going to grab my flat brush. So I've loaded up my flat brush to do my U stroke. And then I actually want to just do one more S stroke with the flat brush. So I found that to be a little easier. Okay, so practice that. Now, there are parts of this painting that are a little too thick, right here. Let me just show you up close. The viscosity of the paint, it was too thick. So now it has a little area that's almost like impasto. And that is something we try to avoid with gouache. But we're going to let it dry and see what happens.
So now we're going to paint with black paint on the number 4 value.
I'm much better at doing the one side than the other. The S curve. Oops, I started wrong. And the U, which seems to be my favorite brushstroke of all time, the flat brush. Remember, you can do the square and then the line. And maybe square with the lines.
Now I'm painting with a mid-tone.
Now I just showed you this. So basically there's not enough liquidity in this brush stroke. So I have now a little dry brush going on, and that's all right. We're going to use that technique in the future. So you can fix it or you can leave it. I just added a little bit more water. That wasn't so good. Mm. Oopsie, then that had too much liquid and it just spreads out too far. So practice. And now I'm going to change my brush again. So I know I love working with my flat brush, but let's try going back to the round brush. We're going to do S's with the round brush. I again, one of the things about the round brush is you have to keep twisting it to a point. So I'm doing this to the brush so that I have a correct tip. And now I'm coming back to my second S. And that really helps me control that edge a little bit more. I can fix it if I want. So with the round brush, there's another technique that you can do, which are, we're gonna make dots. And this is a really important technique. And I use this a lot when I'm painting, which is I get my paintbrush into a point by twisting it on my palette, and then I lay down dots. So we're gonna make the smallest dots that you can possibly make. We're gonna make a rectangle of those. All right, so then let's try to make them even smaller. And I do this, I have to take my glasses off to do this. And I have to put my entire attention, I'll show you up close what I just did. So these are my larger dots, small, and then these are my even smaller dots. And I did them in rows, and then I added a row between the rows. So practice that. Let's go back to our commas. Actually, we're doing our commas upside down, which is actually, I think I should turn the page. Let's just, oh. Okay, so let's try a new one. This is, we're gonna do little X's. So, all right. So practice little X's.
For my last box, I'm going to paint with a 4 on the number 2 value background.
All right, let's try the S's with the flat brush. And then let's turn it upside down to do the commas. With the round brush. Again, swirling the brush on the palette to make a point and wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Okay, so we're gonna do the little dots, and we'll start off with the littlest dots we can make. I'm turning the brush in the paint to make a point, and you can see my point is pretty small. All right, so let's just try this. Have to figure out how to do this so you can see it. So let's just go here, and we're gonna do a box of points. And I'm just barely touching the surface. In a perfect world, my face would be where the camera is, and I would have my glasses off to do this, to get really precise. So I'm gonna go try to make the dots between the dots, and this is where I have to get closer because I gotta see it better. Those look like little tiny commas. So let's try that again because I'm not really happy with that. I'm gonna space them out a little bit more. Now I'm going to try to go right between those dots with a dot. Let's do some X's. So I'm going to turn it upside down so you can, maybe I can show you this. We're going to go right here. I'm going to try to get them to touch. My spacing isn't quite right, but I just keep going. Kind of building up a rhythm. I'm going to try to do it a different way. Let's do it, see if I can't keep it more measured by doing this part first and then coming back. And it gives you a different effect, which is kind of fun. Let's try to keep going with that. Now we're starting to get into a grid. All right, let's try that too. I'm going to try that right here. I wonder if you even saw that. All right. Here you go. So practice that. Practice the big marks. Practice the really small marks. Change the value. The idea is just to get used to painting on a second layer and not disturbing the background too much as you paint. All right, so practice that.